Um, love the matching backgrounds. Thank you. All right, so welcome everybody. Thanks so much for joining us today for our Breaking into UX Design event hosted by Design Collective. If you didn't know, Design Collective is a design club on campus that tries to promote design culture and community, and we're just trying to make design more accessible for everyone to learn about. So I'm super excited for this Q&A because we have a really great group of people who have discovered sort of their interest in design as they were studying something else at McGill, which is a situation that you guys might find yourself in. So we have Melissa Lee, who is a incoming conversation design intern at Facebook. We have Sang-Hoo Oh, who is a VUI design intern at Nuance. We have Kevin Wang, who is incoming product designer at Chan Zuckerberg Initiative. And we also have Neroli Ko, who is an incoming product designer at D2L. And finally, there's me, I'm Carrie, and I am an incoming UX design intern at Eden Speakerman. So today we'll be answering your questions as well as some questions that we think might be helpful to you regarding learning UX or making portfolios, interviews, or general internship advice. And before we get into some introductions, if you guys have any questions that you'd like to ask, please feel free to drop it in the chat or save it until the end. We'll have some time at the end for your questions. And with that being said, Melissa will start us off.
Yeah, for sure. So first, we're just going to do some introductions. We're going to tell you like our name, our year, program, and how we got into design. So Sang-Hoo, would you like to start us off?
Yeah, sure. Hello, everyone. So I'm Sang-Hoo. I'm currently a last year student in cognitive science and minoring in economics. I just got into design from computer science program initially, actually, because I thought it was the quickest way for me to get into testing how products are made and get into tech space. I previously interned at a local insurtech startup called Allset. And like Carrie said, I'm currently working at a conversational AI company with Melissa called Nuance Communications. Nice to meet you all.
Kevin?
There I go. Oh, yeah. So hello, everyone. My name is Kevin. I graduated from McGill Architecture last December, and I'm an incoming product designer at Chan Zuckerberg Initiative. That's basically Mark Zuckerberg's charity. If you guys are unaware of it. And for me, I got into design from actually, I was part of this social club, and then I got, because people were from a variety of backgrounds, and then I was exposed to UX design as an alternative. For me, I felt architecture didn't have the scale of impact that I was hoping that I could achieve. So I found my way, and then I decided to pivot into product design. And during my, before I graduated, I did 3 back-to-back internships, one at an e-commerce company, second at a healthcare company, and then third at a biotech company. Yes. Yeah, and then I got a return offer last year, and then I'll be going back to CZI in a few months.
Awesome. And Neroli?
Hi everyone, I'm Neroli. I'm in my last semester of electrical engineering. So I actually got into, I was introduced to UX design when I was scrolling for electrical engineering internships, and then I saw like UX design on the side, and I thought it sounded cool. I also knew Kevin back then. I knew he was like going into UX design. So I was like trying to look up online about it, and then I realized it's something that it's much more interesting than electrical engineering, so I decided to pivot into that. I previously did an internship at a insurtech startup in Hong Kong, and then right now I'm working part-time at a local educational AI startup. And yeah.
Awesome. Carrie?
Hi, I'm Carrie, and I am a fourth year studying physiology. And I know that my major is not really related to design at all, but I figured out that I wasn't really that passionate about it. So in my second year, I got into design first by sort of making visual graphics and logos for the clubs that I was in. And then through that, I sort of discovered the field of UX design, and I was really interested. So I have interned at a healthcare startup, and I'm going to intern at Eden Speakerman Berlin, which is a design agency, in the fall.
Awesome. And I'm Melissa. I'm a fourth year CogSci student, and I previously did some research internships, and my most recent one was in UX research, where I got to work with like a product designer and a whole tech team. So through that experience, I kind of just picked up design and created my portfolio, did all of that fun stuff, and currently I'm a design intern at Nuance, communications with Sang Hu. And next I will be a conversation design intern at Facebook. So
Cool.
Before we move on, we're going to do a little poll. Yeah, Carrie?
Sorry, no, I was just going to say we want to learn a bit about you guys. So we have a poll to see where you are at in your design journey. So we'll give a couple minutes for that.
Okay, so we're going to wrap up, and it looks like most of our respondents, 52% of you guys are just starting to learn UX. A couple are starting to prepare first case studies, and less are have in portfolios or looking for internships. So it's good to just get a sense of who our audience is. We're going to try to tailor our questions accordingly. And again, if you guys have any questions, just feel free to message in the chat. So our next question is just to get everybody on the same page, but saying who's going to define the difference between UX and UI, how they intersect and how they differ.
Yeah, so I think my definition, and hopefully everybody can agree, is that UI is what you interact with, and UX is how you use that or how you interact with it. So when we say UI, it doesn't necessarily always have to be like the fancy technical thing. Even an object like a chair or a menu can be a UI, and how you use it and how you design it to, to provide the best experience out of it that fits the purpose. I think is what UX is all about.
Yeah, awesome. So now we're going to just talk about how we got started in UX in terms of like our backgrounds, and then like how we highlighted our unique backgrounds and found like our transferable skills. So Kevin, do you want to start us off?
Yeah, sure. So for me, I hope my story is not too long, but like, yeah, and if you guys have any questions in the chat, or Melissa or Carrie, any of you guys want to interrupt me when I talk, or to ask more specifically, like, feel free. So for me, like, it was like kind of back I'll start from before how I got into architecture and how this all worked, if it's okay. So for me, it was like kind of my passion for like self-development that kind of led me into architecture and then to design. So in grade 11, I learned from a study that reveals when there's in the room, when there's more natural light and can actually boost the students' test scores by 25%. So I was like very mind blown and super fascinated by how design decisions are implicitly impacting our performances as well as like even our behavior and well-being. So this kind of led me into studying like architecture for my undergrad degree. But then, yeah, like I mentioned like earlier, I realized in the architectural industry, I wasn't able to make a lot of impact due to the like the seniority and everything and how traditional and conservative the industry is. So I coincidentally then stumbled upon like Hack Harvard, where I participated in as a designer. And during that hackathon, I was like super, I basically fell in love with like the cross-functional collaboration with the my team partners at that time. And then how we were like learning from each other and helping each other out. So I felt like the people I was interacting with in tech was way more compatible in terms of the values that I share with them. And then we were really able to support each other to bring the best of our work. And then the culture and the vibe was all way better. So that led me into diving deep into studying product UX design by myself. And then I took a boot camp, online boot camp, which I'm not sure if I really recommend it. And that kind of still gave me a foundation very quickly. And from there, I took a gap year because McGill doesn't offer co-op like other schools in the other Canadian schools. And especially my program was a very different architecture school in McGill is yeah, it functions more differently. So they kind of dropped me out, and then I just like had this goal that I need to get a return offer before I finish my undergrad. So that's why I did like back-to-back internships. And then from there, I was quite lucky because COVID didn't affect my internships. So I was like very grateful for that. And yeah, from there, I eventually my third one was at Chan Zuckerberg Initiative. So what I worked on during last summer was that I was working on a metagenomic sequencing analysis product to help scientists identify infectious diseases. So it's a little bit related to COVID-19, where some scientists in Cambodia used the software to help like identify the strains in the country. Yeah.
What bootcamp did you do, Kevin?
Oh, bootcamp. The one I did, it was called Block. I think they got acquired by Thankful, which got acquired by Chegg. So yeah, but if you're interested in a bootcamp, I probably will recommend Design Lab, which is more UX design focused. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay, Neroli.
Yep. So I was kind of interested in design when I was small, but then I was also really interested in technology, and that's why I ended up in engineering, because I thought if I want to go into tech, at least having an engineering background would help. But obviously I came to McGill and then realized it's not really something that I want to work my whole life on. So I decided to pivot into UX design or product design. And honestly, having an engineering background, it might sound irrelevant on the surface, but actually because on a day-to-day basis as a designer, you have to work really closely with engineers. So knowing how engineers work definitely help with sort of like setting myself apart when applying for jobs, because people will ask you like, how would you differentiate yourself from other designers? And I will always bring up the point that I'm in engineering and I know how engineers work. Yeah.
Yeah, Nora, I think it's really cool that you are in engineering because it's sort of like relevant, but in terms of like highlighting your unique background and transferable skills, I think if you have a totally unrelated degree like mine, like I'm in physiology, it's less about trying to find parallels between your background and design and more about like approaching design with a beginner mindset. So like I started learning everything from scratch online, and I spent so much time outside of school because I was just trying to make sure that I was good at what I was trying to do. So like something I always struggled with was like I always felt weird applying for UX jobs with a Fiji degree and like trying to explain why I was interested in design. Like I tried to connect Fiji to design by saying that I had an interest in the brain and human behavior, and that translated to UX. But I think in the end, people don't care too much about what you studied. They just want to look at like what projects you've done, and you can always highlight things like communication skills or like looking at data and statistics. So these are like transferable skills that you can take from your whatever you're studying to a career in design.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point because I think I got lucky in choosing cog sci as a degree because sometimes cog sci is like a direct requirement for a lot of these jobs in UX, and mostly because they want to know that you can think about, the way people interact with technology and with each other and stuff like that. But again, it's also outside of your degree, like what are you doing? So for me, I tried to leverage like my research background, and a part of UX design or like product design is definitely doing user research. So kind of tying that together, and there are a lot of transferable skills. And like even in engineering, a lot of engineers sometimes say, they have systematic thinking, and that's how like it can help their design set. So yeah, what is your take, Sanghu?
I guess similar to what you just said, I guess even like when we focus on something like research, there can be like multiple ways you can appeal to that. For instance, you can appeal to your experiences or skills in like the typical UX research, like it could be like interviews, creating personas, observing journeys. In my case, I remember also appealing a lot into how I use like my say business analytical skills. Especially if you're in like management or studied that field a little, like going through industry reports, kind of like quickly knowing better background knowledge of a specific product or the company that's behind it is always helpful. So yeah, I think those kind of differentiating factors always helps.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess a general thing is your degree doesn't necessarily matter. You can just do what you want to do as long as you leverage your skills somehow. So what types of materials do you need to apply for an internship?
Obviously, you need a portfolio with case studies. Usually people would recommend around 3 case studies. You will also need a resume just to, like, when you apply for it, you always put in your resume and also like your website for your portfolio. Sometimes companies might ask for a cover letter, and sometimes I do have, like, I've talked to designers who really like reading cover letters, but some doesn't. So it really depends on the company.
Yeah. I think just like to add on to that, you have to, this is probably obvious, but you should really read the requirements for your job because, some companies have specific requirements like Shopify or Sony PlayStation. I know they had like 3 very specific questions that they wanted you to cover in the cover letter. So just keep an eye out for those types of things. Next question is, what did the portfolio that your first job, that got you your first job look like? As in, how many case studies do you have, and what kind of case studies did you do, / like where did you find those projects?
So I guess I can go. As for me, I guess at the first, my very first job was a startup. unpaid position. For that, back in the day, I just created a portfolio quickly with Wix because I wasn't so skilled in like newer platforms like Webflow, HTML, CSS, stuff like that yet. And I only had like a one flagship project really. Maybe some two lighter projects that I didn't really have much design thinkings or anything like that to back it up. Right now for Nuance, I created my portfolio with Webflow. I don't know if everyone here knows the tool. It's just an easier way to create, do front-end work that could replace your hand coding HTML, CSS. I currently have 4 projects, but realistically 3. One is to be coming. And one is a project that I did at my previous startup. Another project is actually a game project that I designed for a game jam at McGill just last year. And then the third project was actually an economics report for a sustainable economics class I did, which I tied to UX design. I wrote a paper about it and received better result than I expected. So I thought maybe this could be a way to highlight my research abilities. So yeah, that's how I established my very first portfolio.
Awesome. Carrie?
Yeah, I think Sang-Hoo said he had a lot of hackathon projects or stuff that he made during hackathons, and I would agree that hackathons are a good way to learn a lot of things and produce work in a short amount of time, but you're usually sort of limited to like 72 hours or 24 hours or whatever it is. So I would say, like, I began my first case study by designing this hypothetical app that I thought would be really cool to use. So it was like an app that tracked every location that you go to in a day, sort of like a map diary. And so this was like where I started learning about the design process, like really in like details and like how to make a case study. And this took me about a month, I would say, which is much longer than a hackathon. But I was able to spend so much more time just learning about things like personas and research and wireframing and prototyping all on my own time. So at the beginning, I would say it's good to start slow and really learn the process in depth, and having one good quality project that you can like have on your portfolio, but also explain in your interviews is good because you can explain it at length in detail.
Yeah.
So that would be my advice.
Yeah, and typically like on your portfolio website, so we all do have portfolio sites, which we'll link down in the chat later on, but usually you have like 2 or 3 case studies that are pretty good. I know that you have to have one that's definitely a little lengthier and very solid in terms of, you covered all your bases in terms of like the steps, such as your research, like journey mapping, personas, the actual style guides and like things like that. And of course your final solutions. So those are all like important components of each case study, which we'll go over later. But for me, I think something that was really helpful was doing cross-functional products. So I had friends in engineering who were doing some cool things and needed a product designer. And that's kind of like how I picked up design and I learned. And working in a team setting like that really shows you kind of what designs are actually feasible, which is something that you can always talk about in interviews and stuff like that. Kevin, how about you?
Yeah, so for me, I basically did end-to-end product. So I kind of did a project totally from the scratch by defining the why. So when I define the why, that become more like a product manager role. But I did a project relating to a social impact, which was how to connect like food waste from restaurants to charities as a way to be sustainable and then reuse the food that was collected. So I turned that into a full-fledged kind of treating as a startup, myself as a startup, and by using it as a way to learn and meet different people. And from there, that one project, so like my experience from Sang-Hoo, Carrie, and Melissa might be a little bit different. I was actually able to get my most, like actually all my internships just with one very solid quality case study. And then from there, I sometimes just briefly talk about how I collaborate in my previous internships. And that's how I leverage to land like my following subsequent internships. Yeah.
Yeah. And this is just kind of like a side question that we had, but what are our thoughts on unpaid work? So this is like unpaid internships.
Yeah,
Or-
so I think in general, if it's for nonprofit, like there's a club at McGill called Hack for Impact. And I also know at the start of the pandemic, there's like a bunch of people online gathering people for like like a like a project to help with like the COVID situation. And I think like those are fine for unpaid because you're like giving back to the community. But otherwise, I would try not to do unpaid work because it's sort of like this exploiting designers for their hard work for nothing. So I don't think it's a good cycle.
Yeah, like I can add a bit on it too. Actually, I had a period of time I was kind of looking for. I was desperate for a job or an internship, so I was eyeing on like startups or anyone that can take me on. But I tend to realize the quality of the company and then how they treat employees and the quality of work that you're actually doing is actually very low, and then it doesn't help you in your future when you want to like advance in your career. So if you're actually going after paid work, that probably means that they care about design more in the company, and then that will mean you're doing more quality work, which can be usable in the future. So like if I were to do it again, I'll like totally not look at any like most of the unpaid work that startups ask designers to do. Yeah.
Personally, I have a opinion that kind of runs similar and at the same time slightly different. So Kevin mentioned like quality of the company, and I totally agree with that. Depending on the company, and definitely like startups, a lot of them may not, maybe they don't care about as designer, or they just don't have experience enough to comprehend it. But for me, I was very lucky. I met a team that they did not pay me. However, they did care enough to actually bring like another senior designer to kind of almost like tutor me every week. And they would pay the senior designer, and that way I was able to bring a better design for the company as well, right? So I think it's important if you can. I know sometimes it's just hard to get experiences, like the paid ones, especially I think in Canada relative to America. So in that case, just check with the company on what they can offer to you in exchange for free service. So if they, if they can really care about you and offer some, kind of mentorship, and they can really dedicate themselves to you that way. And if it seems like the company's product is receiving some recognition from the market. So for example, my startup was very small at the time, but it was at some recognizable incubators, accelerators. So I thought, okay, this company has some growth potential, and maybe I'll be able to experiment on a reliable product. And for me, fortunately, again, it turned out to be helpful. So it's probably not for everyone's case, but just if you have to apply to some kind of free paid jobs, just be aware of that factor.
Yeah, that's great. And I know another thing is just like sometimes you do want that experience, but there are other ways to get it. And even taking on your own projects just with friends or doing hackathons and clubs at school can be a better experience than doing an unpaid internship, because you shouldn't have to work for free if you can. Okay, so what should a case study include? We're not going to actually go over this question. Instead, we're going to give you guys some resources at the end of this call, or just like on the Design Collective website / like Notion page that has a bunch of resources that we've compiled together that can help you create your first case studies. So how did you guys find your first internships, and what's the hardest part about finding an internship? Okay, so I guess I can go first. Like the number one resource that I used when I was looking for internships was this site called interns.design. and the other one being LinkedIn, but like I barely used LinkedIn just because this interns.design website basically compiles like every single like hot kind of internship that you could want in design. And all these companies pay, and most of the postings are for America, or like the States. So if you want like regional specific ones, you should probably use LinkedIn or Glassdoor or something else. But yeah, Rolly?
Yeah, so I just basically did the same thing. I went on like LinkedIn, Glassdoor, and like applied for every like UX design postings. And I kind of see the job hunting process as sort of like a hurdle. At first, you have to go through like the screening part, the resume part, and then you have to go through like your portfolio, and then you have to go through the interview. And I feel like by seeing how you fail and what part can sort of tell you what is missing. For example, when I just first started applying for internships, I wouldn't even get a screening call from the company. Like they would really like just reject me from the resume screening part. And that sort of made me realize that my resume is not on par. I was not like highlighting my strength. I was like, the font is like too small, like small stuff like that. Just by tweaking it was able to get me to the interviewing stage.
Yeah, same with like I agree with Neroli that getting the interview can sometimes be the hardest part. And what I didn't realize early on was that sometimes to maximize your chances of getting an interview, you should try reaching out to your friends who work at the companies you want to work for. And sometimes like just asking for a referral will get you that internship. Or even like cold emailing startups or companies that you want to work for is a better way to get the interview than just to like mass apply for jobs that you see. And oftentimes, like the people that you email might be busy, so don't be discouraged by that. But yeah, that would be my advice.
Yeah, for me, I found the hardest part more in terms of networking. I was super introverted, and then I didn't know how to approach people or network with people. And I also didn't understand what mentorship meant. So I didn't know how to build a mentorship. I didn't know how to maintain like a relationship like that. I didn't know why they were helping me. So yeah, so like those, I think figuring out those was definitely one of the most challenging aspects for me. And but later, as I get like practice makes perfect, and then when I started reaching out to more and more people, and then more and more people are actually willing to give me their advice and help me out. I realized I gained an extra skills just by on the way of like looking for my internship. So I treat it as an opportunity for growth. Yeah, but breaking through that first few probably steps is definitely the hardest.
For me, I also had a very hard time some time ago, like breaking through the resume part. But a method that really worked out well for me is to, if you all have LinkedIn, just find a recruiter in the company that is currently looking for an internship, for example, and directly contact them with your resume. This has two benefits. First, so a lot of these big companies, if you're applying to a big one, the machine sometimes just filters the resumes out if it doesn't fit certain format that it can read. So by contacting the recruiter, you kind of avoid that obstacle. And secondly, it kind of throws you the burden of writing unnecessary cover letters by writing in a more casual and interactive manner, communicating directly with the recruiter. You can write in a way a cover letter more persuasively and in a more, just more communicatively, and it works better. And you literally, the recruiter most of the time responds fast. Especially if they have a university recruiter, like Nuance they did, it's even better. They'll most likely respond to you. So kind of use that opportunity offered by LinkedIn is what I would add.
Yeah, and I think just like the broader design community is very welcoming. I would say you can definitely set up coffee chats with people you don't know. again, like we'll list some resources later on, but there are sites where you can just, you know, set up a 30-minute call with someone and they'll be happy to chat with you and answer any of your questions. And I would like refrain from just asking for a referral from someone you don't know. Typically, you want to probably build up a relationship at least a little bit. So 1 or 2 calls, just to make sure that it's not like awkward and like you get rejected right away. Like some people are not okay with that. Yeah. So a follow-up question is, do you need to meet all the job requirements to apply?
I would say the short answer is no, you don't. Like, apply no matter what, but to an extent. So if the requirements are basic technical skills, like they need you to know how to use a design tool, or they say you need like 2 years of experience, no, just apply anyway, because sometimes you can still land the interview. But if the requirements are something concrete and specific, like having a visa or not speaking a language that you clearly like don't have, then obviously don't waste your time applying. Like for example, I applied to a Montreal company that required you to speak French, and I don't really speak French, and I got rejected, so that was a waste of time. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And I think they typically split up the requirements in terms of like minimum requirements and like preferred. So if you can try to meet the minimum ones, that's like gold standard. And then if you can't meet all of the preferred ones, then that's fine. Follow up, how do you handle frequent rejections? I personally just have like a rejection folder on my email and I just like forward them there. It doesn't really bother me, I guess. I think it's like a numbers game, most people say. So even if you get rejections, like it's okay. Like these recruiters are getting so many applications that they'll spend a couple seconds to like a couple minutes maybe on even looking at your actual website. So you have to catch their attention fast. And sometimes it just like doesn't happen in your favor. But that's totally fine. Like I got rejected from a bunch of companies this summer before getting my internship at Facebook. And I think it's just part of the process really is getting rejected. How about you guys?
Yeah, honestly, I'm numb to rejections. I get them so frequently.
Oh, like how I look at it is funny. I don't even pay attention. I don't keep track, or I don't even look at the rejections because I think they have nothing to do with me in a sense. I only keep track of the interviews I get and the offers I get. And then if you actually count the success rate like that, it's like very high. But if you add in all the things, all those like applications you send in and then I didn't reply you, it seems like it kind of discourages you. So I will try to tweak your mind to a more positive and to your favor that encourage you to work harder kind of way, just to make you feel happy and comfortable when you're going through the process. But yeah.
Yeah. Anyone else?
I would say like everybody already kind of said that there's just like a huge variety of factors that really impact your like employment decision, to be honest. Like it could be like simple things like visa. Some of my friends, very talented, could not get through like the final stage because of that. In the screening phase, it could be like the screening machine, the software, maybe the HR was lazy or they just were overlooking it. Some fields, they just have a very specific type of candidates to look for. So I applied to a game company and managed to pass through the resume stage, but right away they were like, we look for people, candidates, designer who really like our game, which was Fortnite. It was Epic Games, and I barely have experience playing that game myself. So there's probably a logical reason if you didn't make it, why, like that perhaps could not be your fault, especially during this time of COVID. So yeah, like just don't be discouraged. I personally have like a great graveyard of my failed resumes, and every time I kind of improve upon it and the results gets better, it makes me actually feel better. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so now we're going to kind of talk about what the interview process looks like once you get past the screen. So you're not rejected. And I think, yeah, who wants to talk about this? Who wants to take this question? Neroli?
Yeah, for the interview, like it could take like be different types. You could have like design challenges. They will ask you to build something in a fixed amount of time, and then you have to go and present like your design process. It could be portfolio reviews. You might have to take 1 or 2 case studies from your portfolio and then present it to like a panel of designers. It could be app critiques. They might ask you like to critique their app and then see how you think. And different types have like different methods that you can prepare, and I'm sure we'll link some resources down there. And I can talk about the portfolio reviews because I've gone through that the most. I went for the longest time not knowing that I actually need a slide deck because I thought I would just go in and then explain, scroll through my website and then explain. But then apparently when I have coffee chats with senior designers, they will always say that they prefer slides just because you can capture their attention to just the slides, that particular slides. And also you can use the slide to prove that you have like good communication or design skills. For example, you don't want to put like too much text. You want like some really pop-up thing that could help with explanation. And I feel like this is like a really good tip if you got to the interview process and you don't want to like fail the interview.
Yeah, for sure. And if you guys have more specific questions, definitely link it in the chat. But in terms of design challenges, some companies will give you a design challenge that you have to complete within a certain number of days. So I know, Carrie, you can probably talk more about this one.
Yeah, so for a company, they asked me to complete a design challenge, and so it had to be done like in a specific amount of time. Like I think they gave me 3 days to do it. And so like for this one, I was like in the middle of my midterms and I had a lot of work to do. So I wasn't like that happy about doing work for a company just like for another interview. But it is a typical requirement of the interview process. So I would say like, don't stress too much over it. If you have to do it, and just spend as much time as you can. They're usually just looking to like check that box, I feel like. I don't know if you agree.
Yeah, for sure. And you typically won't get like all of these different interview options. Like you'll get 1 or 2 max. I know for me, I did the app critique and the portfolio presentation. And the app critique, there's a lot of resources on all of these types of interviews, but for app critique, you typically want to choose a framework that you're going to go through with, and then you're going to be on the call with the recruiter, and they'll pick an app from your phone at random at the beginning of the call, and then you have to kind of dissect the app and talk about, the good, the bad, like how you would change it, what the designer probably thought. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of nuances about each different process. But again, there's like a lot of resources out there. Typically I use Medium, but yeah. So,
Also, just want to add something. Try and practice your interview with someone else. Just go on ADP list. We'll link it somewhere. Just book coffee chat with senior designers and ask them if we can do like a mock interview with them, and then they will give you feedback. And I think this is like the best way to practice for interviews.
Yeah, or any of us, if you're too scared to like talk to an actual designer, we'd all be happy to help you with mock interviews.
Yeah.
Can I just add one more thing with the design challenge?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So for me, like like Melissa and I are working right now at a company called Nuance, and in case a lot of people don't know that company, it's the company that made like Siri, Samsung's S Voice. So it's like that conversational AI field, and it was for both of us just like obviously a pretty new field to go into because it's not a typical visual UX design we usually associate ourselves with. So to prepare for the design challenge, what I did, or at least expecting a design challenge of some sort, I actually ran through a couple design case studies in VUI, one by Google, one by some other company I forgot. But it kind of got me to familiarize myself with a design flow, steps in design that specific field pertains to. So if you're applying to say like fintech, or I don't know, if you're applying to like a game company for UX design position, it might be a good idea to kind of familiarize yourself with a couple like case studies on how designers in the field actually design, and you'll be able to provide a more convincing form of design challenge work.
Yeah. Okay, I guess to wrap us up, we're coming down to our audience questions now. So the first question is, are there as many opportunities in the UX field outside of North America, or should I remain focused on acquiring a job in Canada or the US? Carrie?
Yeah, I think so. Like, I know a lot of opportunities are centered in the US and like Silicon Valley, and also like Canada, because the UX field is growing a lot here. But it's definitely possible, and there are a lot of opportunities for UX design outside of North America. Like, I know a lot of people who worked in Singapore, and like I'm going to Berlin this fall, and I know Neroli worked in Hong Kong. And like I just got lucky because I saw a posting from an agency that I wanted to work in, and their posting was in Europe, so I got to apply for that. So I would just say look around, and Berlin and Amsterdam are like big tech hotspots in Europe. And European countries are also generally fairly easy to get visas for, especially if you're Canadian. So yeah, definitely check those out if you're interested in working outside of North America.
I definitely feel like North America is more mature in the UX side, especially for the States, because there's a lot of big companies. From my experience in Hong Kong, I feel like the field there is not mature at all. There's really rarely anyone who actually knows what it is about. And a lot of times companies would recruit for UX, UI designers, and they would ask them to do like marketing or something. But obviously I know that there's still people there who really cares about, and if you're interested in that certain area, for sure, go for it. And also I know that for certain, like for example, I follow a designer on Instagram, and she's working in Japan right now. And like the design in Japan is drastically different from like in the US, because people are culturally different. So you might also have to take into account those cultural differences.
Yeah, I can also share what I know about like big tech companies in China. So I was actually thinking about it before, and unless you have a citizenship in China, or like some sort of a visa that can get you in there, they usually, like the tech companies, because the internships in China is very short. I think it's only like less than 3 months, like 2 months even. So they're not willing to do any sponsorship for visas for like design interns. When I was talking to like people in Tencent, ByteDance, and Alibaba, mainly because it's too short to sponsor. So unless you're able to, maybe you can do an exchange in China, and then you have like a different visa, and then you'll probably be able, you're more likely to get an internship in the big tech companies. And also, well, one problem is that they might care about your like proficiency in Mandarin. So that might be something you should take into consideration. But at the same time, they all have like offices in Silicon Valley. So if you're interested in those companies in China, you can apply for the ones in the Bay. So yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so is there any part of your UX design job that is not really enjoyable for you, and how have you dealt with that? I think with like every job, there's going to be parts that are just not as glamorous. For us as VUI designers, like Singhu and I at Nuance, you know, it's not always fun doing sample dialogues or, you know, certain things. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Just for VUI, you don't get that ecstasy of, you know, seeing something beautiful you drew out. And we're not like Shakespeare writing a novel or a poem either. So we're just trying to write a very user-friendly type of interaction through words. So yeah, that would be a slight downside to some people, for sure.
Yeah, I can also add on to it because I worked at quite a few, like four companies. So what I've seen is that it's definitely more enjoyable in a company that values design more, and then the more that they don't respect design, the more that you're gonna have a very sad time in your position, because basically when you cannot make an impact, what you end up doing is doing like philosophical thinking and philosophical talking and just trying to deal with like office politics in a sense to get your work pushing forward rather than making an impact. So finding a company that value design is definitely gonna be more enjoyable and pay more attention to that. Just by seeing the amount of designers in a company will probably give you a sense of how much they allocate resources into design. Yeah.
And to add on to that, like even if your company isn't, very well known for design or, prioritizing design, also look at your team that you're interviewing with, because that can make a difference. So even if your team is very design centric and, you guys can band together and advocate for design, then that is good enough sometimes. So
yeah, if you can make room for design, and I think it's also about the culture of some like, I would say some older tech companies they have a very engineering minded culture. Even like, for example, Microsoft used to be very engineering culture, like or PM culture. And then basically when you're trying to introduce function into those companies, it becomes like you're stealing away resources and responsibilities from them, and then that adds friction and becomes challenging. But then if you're at a startup or a younger company that's very open-minded and then already embrace cross-functional collaboration, it definitely makes it very easy to introduce design into the company.
yeah. Next question is, what advice did you give yourself before you began to apply for jobs for the first time? I would say, I don't know, this is kind of a hard question. Make sure that, the basic stuff is like making sure you don't have like grammatical errors or things on your resume and your website. But really, I guess looking back at my first portfolio, I would say you want to really put yourself in the shoes of the recruiter and make sure you catch their attention at the first go. So when your website loads, when your portfolio loads, you want to make sure there's something good for them and they don't have to, search through your site to find the details about you or your case studies. It should be all up front and easy for them. Just keep in mind that recruiters are not only looking at your portfolio, they're looking at hundreds, maybe in a day, and they get bogged down at a certain point and they don't want to look at these anymore. So you have to really try to stand out. That's what I would say. Anyone else?
I'll say that reach out to designers and then get some feedback on your portfolio, on your resume, on your interview skills. Because when I first started, I was really, really reluctant to reach out. I would feel like I'm wasting people's time or I'm just shy and I don't want to talk to people. But I've felt like this has hindered a lot of the job hunting process when I first started out. And once I started reaching out to people, I feel like I've improved a lot, and that's how I sort of landed the roles that I'm at currently and will be in the future.
Yeah. So we're kind of running out of time. So this is going to be our last question. But what did you find yourself not doing in your role that you expected before you obtained the job?
I guess I can go first. And I guess Melissa will agree too. But as a VUI designer, VUI here is voice UI. So again, like how you interact with your AI, whether it be like Alexa or your IVR on phone. There were much more tools that we had to learn than expected. Like we don't really use Figma and stuff here. We were learning to write pretty much like pseudocodes, stuff for the developers, just funny because I, came out from computer science program because I hated coding. I'm kind of doing it, constructing the basics for the developers themselves in a way. Just, what was the question? Yeah, those were some things that I did not expect. But again, I applied because there were some other type of skill sets that I want to acquire. Just don't be too discouraged if you ever come across a task that you didn't expect, but you had to do it anyways.
Yeah, for sure. So Carrie's gonna wrap up for us and tell you about things that we've prepared.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming today. It's great to see such a growing interest in UX design, especially at McGill. But since we're sort of running out of time, we have posted resources for UX design, so like courses and articles that you might want to read on our website, which is designcollective.club. And we also have a feedback form that I'll post in the Facebook event after this event, and we would really appreciate it if you told us how you thought this event went. And I think all of us are willing to stay behind and answer any of the questions that you might still have. So feel free to type it in the chat if you want us want our input, but you are free to leave if you want now. And thank you so much for coming. We have a question from Shane. Any impressions? Any impressions on Google's new Grow with Google UX certificate program?
I have not heard of it. But I think like, I don't know if you're talking about the program that's a part of the certificates that Google is giving out right now. Okay. Yeah, I have no personal opinion on it, but I think that if you are starting out in design, any type of resource is good. How did I didn't really do a boot camp or anything or certificate.
Yeah, same. I kind of I didn't want to do more school, so I thought like the most valuable way I could spend my time was to actually like start making projects. But it's also totally valid to take an online course. Like I think they put a lot of work into them, and like you can learn a lot from them.
Yeah.
It could, I guess, also shows that you're familiarized yourself with designing specific to their platforms or services, which could be advantageous when applying. I'm just hoping it doesn't like cost like $2,000 a course.
Yeah, definitely be careful because I think like General Assembly costs like $10,000 or something like that.
I do know there are like a lot of companies right now are offering their own like program. I think Shopify has their like own like university type of thing. And I read articles about it, different opinions. Yeah, just like check opinions from people who actually took them. I'm sure it'll be like more valuable instead.
Yeah, I hope that answered your question. From Nick, we have the question of, could you give an example of something you would say to a recruiter when reaching out on LinkedIn with your resume? I think generally for me, I talk a little bit about myself and my background, some of my experiences, and then link my resume and portfolio along with like why I want to work for the company. I don't know, what are your thoughts?
Me, when I do this, so I kind of actually have a template now for myself for this type of letter to recruiters. I just change the content slightly based on the industry they're in. So for example, to my company right now that I applied to, I was like, I would first write down what experience I have relevant to the specific industry. Like, for example, if you have a design project pertaining to certain industry, like for me, in this case, conversational AI, that project wasn't actually in my portfolio yet. It was just a hackathon project I did with a recording of my presentation. So I showed it to the recruiter with my resume. in the past. When I applied to Epic Games, then I would show them like my game portfolio project, and that passed. And yeah, I would kind of do that as much as possible if I could do it. If you have the amount of projects or versatility in projects, that's what I would usually do. Also, like as for tone, you can be pretty casual, I think. No need to be like too formal. Be like, yeah, like I was really interested in your company. I really like the initiative you do. Look at what I did. And therefore I think I could be a good candidate for your thing. And that doesn't need to be too long. Yeah.
Yeah. Also, don't make it like exceedingly long because they probably won't read it. That's the recruiters. They don't have time. So just make it short and sweet if you can.
Yeah, that's a good point. I also have a template. If you are interested in seeing it, you can just message me. But the next question is from Alex. I have a few interviews starting next week, and I've never done any for design stuff. Any last minute tips?
And kudos, congratulations.
Yeah, that's great.
Tips. Okay. What kind of well, do you know what kind of interview it is? If you can tell us, then that could probably help. Like, is it a recruiter screen or is it going to be a whiteboarding challenge? Oh, we didn't even cover that, but yeah, just like what type of interview, and then maybe
Are they allowed to speak up or they have to type?
You
yeah,
can unmute. Yeah, for sure.
You guys can unmute. You guys don't have to type in the chat.
Can you guys hear me?
You can talk. Yeah.
Yeah, so basically they haven't really told me exactly what it's going to be, but they said that they'd like to have a chat. For one of them, I actually did a design challenge. So they said that they only invite people that actually pass the design challenge. So I'm guessing like they've already seen like some of my work. But for the other one, it's more like I went to the tech fair and I talked to someone there, and then they finally got around to looking at my CV and stuff. And they're like, oh, we'd like to have a chat with you next week. So I'm just wondering if you guys have any tips about like, what should I talk about? How should I approach it? You know, are there like any specific important questions that you guys would ask? Like, I don't know, obviously not necessarily paid, but something like what kind of projects would you be working on, etc.
Yeah. I think that's a good question. I think it depends. Are you able to tell us like the size of the company? Because I think that gives us a better sense of what the
one of them is a small startup in Montreal. They're not new, but they're still like growing, and now they're expanding, which is why they're hiring more people. And the other one is a bit of a bigger company, and they basically like design a Shopify website, templates for big companies. I think they've done work for like some big brands. I don't remember exactly which ones because it's been a while since I've looked at their websites. But yeah, they've done some work for like bigger companies too.
May I ask, have you done like the HR stage interview? Like, was there any form of interview before the design challenge part?
No, so both of them I've met at like through either McGill Tech Fair or McGill like job fair. So I've met like some people that were like recruiters at the companies, and like they just asked me like who I am. I told them about that stuff, but I think I'm meeting with different people than I did at the tech fair. So it'd be like as if I'm meeting someone for the first time once again.
Yeah, so I would say you're probably going to get an interview, and take this with a grain of salt because I don't know exactly, but you're likely going to get a recruiter screen. And depending, like if it's a smaller company, maybe they'll ask more questions. Like for Nuance and for Facebook, like the first call was just the recruiter, you know, prepping you for what's next. They would ask you really basic questions like why this company, or about certain things on your resume that weren't clear to them or that they want like more information about in terms of you as a candidate. And then, yeah, I would make sure that I know about the company and about their mission and about what kind of products that they're building. I would also be sure to include or to prepare a few questions to ask the recruiter to show your interest. So whether that be like team, culture, what your role specifically will be, all of those are good questions to have ready.
Great. Would you normally ask like, I went to a bunch of like CAPS like workshops and stuff, and they usually tell you to ask if you're going to be assigned to someone. So like if you're gonna have someone like not looking over you, but like, you know, managing your products and stuff, is that like a good question to ask, do you guys think, or not really?
Yeah, I think it depends on how you frame it. So you should probably say, you know, what is the mentorship available to me if I was to take this position?
Or
Anyone
like
else?
how are the teams structured at the organization? Like, are there designers? Like, are there only designers with a team, or like, is there a designer, developer, product manager within each team? So like how are the teams structured?
So they haven't said anything, but based on the application process, it looks like they're hiring like individual, like developers, designers, and like project managers, blah blah. Like they're hiring different ones. So I don't think like one person has all the roles, but I think it's like from what I could tell, it's like at each person is assigned like a specific project. I don't know if there's like specific teams built up in the team and in the places.
We were discussing like what question to ask a recruiter here, right? If I understood correctly.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So one question kind of in relation to what Carrie said, I always ask, it's like, sometimes I'm not even really curious about it, but I ask you anyways. It's like, yeah, you always have that question. So how does your, you know, designer and other team members, whether it be developers or project managers, interact with each other? Will I have opportunities to work with them? Honestly, I don't really care about working with them, but I ask them anyway. It shows me I'm some kind of communicative dude that, you know, can interact with other developers or people in other career shifts and can, you know, produce like a persuasive design. So that could be a one useful question to that, if that helps.
No, that actually sounds really good.
It's actually, yeah, it's a pretty useful question though, for sure.
Also, a weird tip is to try and position yourself as if you're interviewing them as well, because you're interviewing for the company, like you're interviewing the company to see if the role fits you, and that sort of gives you like a boost of confidence. And somehow it worked for me. I heard that it worked for someone else, so maybe try that as well.
You
Sounds
can
good.
also, you can also ask questions for like the benefits your internship can provide. Like I said, if it's a startup, like I said, do you guys, if it's unpaid, can you guys like match me up with some kind of mentor, or like what are the benefits I can get in that kind of way to build my profession that can also benefit the company in the long run. And also if it's like a bigger company, then, you know, is there any like specific programs like our company, and I'm sure like other guys companies too, maybe to interns, they have like weekly some kind of presentations by senior members of the company on certain topics. Do you have like, what kind of learning opportunities do you offer to interns, etc.? That kind of, again, reflect you as a candidate eager to learn and continue developing yourself. So that's another question I would have.
Thanks. Those are actually really good questions. I wrote them all down. I had one last thing. I was just curious. So you were talking about there's like a recruiter like screening, because I've never actually done an interview like this. So do you guys know how it goes like usually in an interview like this?
Yeah, recruiter screen is super basic, and they won't really ask you anything too difficult. They won't ask you. Sometimes they'll ask you to pull up your website portfolio and go through it with them simultaneously, and just walk them through one of your projects. So that's a possibility. But for the most part, it's to prepare you for the interviews that you're going to have coming up. So they will ask you maybe a few questions that they have outstanding, and maybe walk through your portfolio, and then tell you, you know, if they're interested. Oh, like next, we're going to put you in touch with the hiring manager, and you're going to have to present to them, or I'm going to send you a design challenge right after this, or something along those lines.
Okay, but usually, oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, you probably already know this, but something that I've always been asked in like almost every interview is, why do you want to work for this company? So like, I would make sure to rehearse that answer, and like generally rehearsing everything that you are gonna say is a good idea.
That's a great point you made. And when you answer that, personally, I make scripts beforehand. Like there are always like these recurring questions, and you can check Glassdoor for a specific company for those questions, or you can Google search, and typical HR questions you can find there. And one of them is like, why our company? And when you approach that question, when I applied to a game company, I said I didn't say it's. Okay, actually, for the Epic Games company, I first said, because this game is a little bit of a niche field in design, I would say game touches on certain aspects of psychology that other type of UX design doesn't touch on, like, ecstasy in a way, your emotions, and I'm really interested in that. That's so I wanted to, apply to the game industry. And then I progressed on to saying, look, in my hackathon game jam project, I was inspired by Fortnite, your company's game, to create this game, and it won the award by EA. So, or even without the EA part, winning part, like if your project can relate to that company's specific, portfolio, their initiatives, then it can be a powerful way of, appealing to them, like why you want that company.
Cool. Okay. Thank you. That's great.
But always make a script. When I didn't, I made some very dumb mistakes, pre-screening, saying things like I skipped school. I don't know why I did that for Samsung. Yeah.
I'll definitely make a script. Yeah.
All right. Do we have any other questions?
Could I ask a question really quick?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. So I'm a second year cog sci student. And as I've been looking for internships, most of them seem like they're directed at people that are in like design majors, which obviously McGill doesn't have. So I think like coming from there, do you think I should try to leverage like outside skills and projects, or try to connect cog sci and thinking and that kind of stuff with like my background?
As a cog sci student, I would say that you should do projects for sure. If you want, you can kind of leverage your cog sci skills within those projects, but definitely having concrete projects helps you get the job. Do you have other like more specific questions about, like, does that answer your question?
I guess, yeah, no, that's a good answer. I'd like, because most of them seem like the requirement is that you're coming from like a design major. So do you think just apply anyways and try to showcase other skills?
Yeah. That is the one requirement that you don't always have to meet being a designer, or like having a design degree. There are also some design jobs that say, oh, if you're a cog sci or a psych or adjacent field, cog sci definitely falls in the adjacent field right there. So yeah, you don't, yeah.
I would say cog sci is the best major to be in at McGill if you want to go into UX.
Yeah.
Or psychology.
Agreed. Maybe architecture. No, I'm kidding. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Any other questions before we wrap up? If you do have a question, you can always feel free to message us individually, or however you want, and we would be happy to answer your questions. But if not, thank you so much for coming. And also please fill out our feedback form. We'll have it in the event description or event. All right.